Hi, welcome to the first lesson of Understanding Earth, your basics of geology. Today we're going to look at Ussher and Steno, two really important figures in the history of geology. Rather, the history of geological science, because geology has been studied since antiquity. There's Pliny, who documented various mineralogical observations in the past, but no one really categorized and studied geology until the 17th century in a meaningful way. There were curious minds along the way, but it wasn't until a man named Archbishop Ussher came along, James Ussher, in Ireland. He was the first to really popularize, or at least he's the most well-known person to have asked a very important question in geology, and that was, how old is the Earth? Seems like a very simple question, but in reality, it's a question that's taken at least 300 years to answer. Ussher's best known for trying to answer this question, how old is the Earth? Of course, being a Christian archbishop, the ultimate answers for him lay within the Bible. And it wasn't really a matter of natural science so much as a theological question that could be found, the answer to which could be found in the Bible. So what he did was he went through the books of the Bible, counted up the ages of people, the family trees, referenced it with dates in history that could be confirmed, and he came up with an age for the Earth. That age was 4004 BC, and based on the Bible, this was when the Earth must have been created, putting the Earth at 6,000 years old, roughly. Now, that seemed a bit far-fetched, and even people in the day, this is the early to mid-1600s, even people in the day, the curious minds, the naturalists, thought that might be a little brief of a time for the entire world that we see around us to have been created. Of course, being religion, it was adopted as wrote. It was another man of religion who came along and didn't so much try to answer the question directly, how old is the Earth? But in my opinion, he started the entire path of geology on that journey to actually answering the question, rather than finding it in a religious text. That man was Nicholas Steno. Now, he was a Danish bishop in Italy in the mid-1600s, and he was also known for his very curious nature. He would study rocks, what he called strata. You've probably seen layers of sedimentary rock in, like a book, like the pages in a book, like this. He studied those, and in them he found what looked like organisms, fossils, animals. One thing in particular, he found what looked like shark's teeth, and a pretty famous anecdote is that he sent far away from Florence to the coast of Italy to see a shark's head, have it sent all the way to Florence so he could confirm that what he was finding in the rocks were in fact shark's teeth, and they were. Now this was pretty confusing, because how did something once living end up in solid matter, solid rock? And this confused Steno. But he had a lot of time to think about this. And he really laid the foundation for modern sedimentary geology. He gave us the basics. He didn't answer how old the Earth was, but from this, it eventually was derived. His basic laws are still used and taught in geology courses today in university. The first being the law of superposition. He said those little shark's teeth in the strata are layers, one stratum, two stratum, strata, to be plural. He'd find these shark's teeth coming out, and he figured the only way that they could have gotten in there is if there was the sea floor, a shark's tooth laid down there, dropped from above in suspension in the water, and then as more sediment from the rivers and mountains, the wind, just sifted through the water and laid on top, in that way you could actually encase these teeth and organisms in rock. He didn't really understand the rest of it, but the basic principle is that the oldest layers of rock will be at the bottom. And that seems like a really simple thing, but it actually is the basis from which we derive a lot of geological understanding and assumptions. And it stands true. Second thing was original horizontality. It's a big word, but all it means is that sediments coming out of suspension in water, like all that silt, sand, whatever that comes out of rivers and oceans, it all sinks to the bottom. And it sinks to the bottom horizontally, in line with the horizon, because gravity is pulling it to the center of the earth. So that means that sediments will stack up on top of each other, always horizontally, or roughly, very close. That means that if you see sedimentary rocks sticking out of a cliff face and they're on this angle, they didn't get laid down that way. They've since been tilted up. So that's a pretty big understanding, pretty big leap, and pretty impressive for a man of the cloth in the 1600s to have figured out. Now he had a couple of other ones, like the law of cross-cutting. Like if you have these strata and something is cross-cutting it, like say a river or a tree root, or more likely in geology, a vein of another rock, it means that the thing that's cross-cutting it must be younger, because the cross-cutting thing is interrupting those nice strata, so it would have come after. These are kind of boring logistical things, but you'll see that they're really important in the coming lectures when we discuss age and the rest of this journey. So it's really thanks to Usher, who set us off with How Old is the Earth, and then Steno, who laid the foundation of this study. So that's where we're going with this lecture. Next, we're going to talk about the practical side of where these findings took them. And it's pretty interesting stuff, so stay tuned.